Have we talked about breaking things down?
Um,
Because this kind of made me, as we're talking about this one and we're talking about scope, one of the things I see a lot of developers having bad habits on is just taking a ticket and running with it and not taking a pause and looking at what they're supposed to do and breaking it down and making sure that it is, uh, that they understand what the task is.
actually, that I like that. That actually fits very well with the idea of sort of like leveling out your calendar, your daily grind kind of stuff, because it's the same thing. It's like taking that big project and breaking it down into the little steps that are going to be required to get you to that, to completion, basically. So I like that as a I don't know where we'll get from a title, but basically the idea of like avoiding, you know, too high a high or too low a lows, avoiding getting stuck in something that that's basically just too big, biting off more than you can chew. Um,
I was
some of
thinking
it's just
kind of along
simplifying
the
your
lines
task.
of understanding the problem.
Yeah, it does go back. It's like a little bit like we talked about. It's like actually spending a little time on design kind of thing. It's like where are we at and stuff like that, as opposed to diving in and figure out how that's going to go. So I think that works. Oh, by the way,
We hit
welcome back,
record.
everybody. After we are recording, we just sort of like, so at some point here, Michael's going to edit in and it'll be like, hey, we're restarting because we were running for too long. Not like bonus bad thing. Not like I did the other day where I somehow left a Zoom meeting and didn't leave the Zoom meeting. And so it ran for like 16 hours. It was recording and yeah. So we had to edit that sucker down quite a bit because it was taking up a lot of space and was very useless as far as to anybody that would ever want to see it. It's like, why did you just let me see 10 hours of a dark office, and stuff like that? That is exactly what we've run into.
And that is how you kill your Zoom account.
Yes, it does. Zoom doesn't like that. They will tell you, by the way, that it's like, hey, we are not going to record it. Well, unless you're on the unlimited account. I guess there is an unlimited somewhere. But in our situation, we were not on the unlimited. And guess what? They said, hey, we are not going to record anymore until you clean some of that crap up because you are blowing through your quota. Because a lot of, hours and hours a day of video, it takes up some space. So yeah, word to the wise, get yourself out of your Zoom meetings. It's just like one of those things. It's like when you think you're on mute, make sure you are on mute before you get into it too far, because sometimes that will cause some problems.
You don't want to end up in the situation where you left the oven on, left the house, and your house burned down.
Exactly. Even if it is the figurative, you let the house burn down because you thought you were on mute and you were saying bad things about your boss, and then your boss now fired you because they didn't like what you had to say, or similar kinds of things. So beware, be wise out there. So we will dive into, let's call it simplifying things or whatever it's going to be. We'll get into that one here. Three, two, one. Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season of building better habits. We're building better developers. We are the Developreneur podcast. I am Rob Broadhead, one of the founders of all of the aforementioned, also a founder of RB Consulting, where we help you figure out how to take technology and make it your workhorse. It allows you to become better as a company, as a boss, or whatever it is you do, is doing your business better, is taking technology, leveraging that through simplification, automation, integration, and even research and some of the things we'll do so we can help you figure out where do you need to be, not just today to be more productive, but what are the trends? What are the things that you need to do so that you don't have to come back and hire consultants and teams every year and redo all of this stuff. Instead, you have a roadmap for the future that allows you to put a serious budget to it that doesn't have all kinds of wild estimations. You know where your growth is, and you know that your systems are going to be there when you need them, and they're going to be, I don't know, reliable and some of those kinds of things that people like to have. As far as habits go, this time around, I want to talk about, because I've talked about Pomodoro probably a little bit too much in those. One of the ones that's really been good that I've made some adjustments on, which actually goes to our one of our most recent prior episodes, is the list, is figuring out where my priorities are. And it's really been a challenge because I have a lot of priorities. Everything's a priority. I have a big list of things that I have to do, but in doing so, I've been able to adjust a little bit with my list habit of looking at that list and taking one item for the couple of things that have to be touched, for the projects that have to be touched, for the customers I have to reach out to, things like that, at least one thing in each of those. So it's a little bit of a different approach from prioritizing stuff, as much as it's saying, these things are all critical, but I want to make sure that I at least get these things done. And it's sort of, really refining and pushing to the why. What is it? What do I need to do to take a step forward in each of these areas? And so that's helped me quite a bit from the habit side of things. In the good things, bad things, I've come through it, like I think maybe a lot of you have come from a lull, and it was a little bit of a struggle getting through the holidays to make sure that I was taking advantage of what I need to take advantage of. And that is going to get a little bit into our topic today. But it was making sure that I wasn't just sitting there twiddling my thumbs and things like that. And so I was like struggling a little bit because it was hard to start the day when I didn't necessarily know what I had, and I had to go look for work to do to some extent. It's not really that I had to look for work to do, is I had to figure out what is it that I want to attack next. I had too many options essentially. So a little bit of a challenge. The good news is I made it through there. And then as we start into the year, it's like, bam, slammed with everything. So I don't have to worry about that. I got so much stuff to do. I'm having to figure out what I can't do today to build my list. It's basically, my list is huge, and I'm having to just whack away at that to get it down to something that I can get done in a reasonable amount of time. One of the big items on my list today is to pass this over to Michael and let him introduce himself. So I'm going to let him introduce himself while I go check that off my list.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Meloche. I'm one of the co-founders of Building Better Developers, Develpreneur. I'm also the founder of Envision QA, where we are your software development and quality assurance partner. We build tailored software to meet the needs of healthcare professionals and small to mid-sized e-commerce businesses. We work with you, we figure out what your business needs, and we help identify the systems that you need to have built for you, or to customize what you have to work for you so that your software works for you. You aren't working for your software. Good and bad. Good, I'm getting a little more sleep. Like Rob, I'm hacking things off my list. I'm actually kind of getting back on track from the holidays. So things are getting back into more of a grind, a routine. Bad thing, it took me a good portion of the week to get back to that routine. Lost a couple of days of sleep and just trying to get back into normal habits after the holidays. And with that, talking about the habits, so this past week, what I've really been working on a lot is trying to break things down a little bit, which will kind of lead into this episode, and also talking about or working on my lists and trying to focus on what needs to be done in the near future to make sure that all the projects I'm working on are on track, where they need to be, and make sure that we meet those deadlines that are coming up in the next few months.
And that really gets to, I think, what I want to focus on is there's a couple of ways we can look at the topic this time around. And it could be the idea of um, leveling out your schedule, your work schedule. Because say, we tend to have sort of a feast or famine kind of thing where there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and then there's not as much work that needs to be done. And it's sort of the IT norm that you'll have like a regular steady little hum, and then the next thing you know, we've got to crank everything out for production release, and things go wrong and all this kind of stuff. And so now we're working late nights, we're working through the weekends, and we're exhausted. And the stuff that really is not helpful in the grand scheme of things, it's not as productive, it's not healthy, and finding ways to level that out. But part of that is really making sure that we can break things down in a way that then we can sprinkle it across the days and the weeks to get to that point. So like Michael said, is that there's going to be things that we know are coming up that there's going to be a lot of work. So we need to start chipping away at that now versus waiting until it becomes critical and then dealing with it. It's sort of like if it's the death by a thousand cuts kind of thing. It's like if you're like sort of addressing stuff as it goes, then everything's a little thing. But if you let too many of them go, then the next thing you know, that's now you're bleeding to death and you're trying to patch all that stuff up at once, as opposed to taking the little things as they go. Now, this is not firefighting and just being like, okay, I'm just going to fix the thing that's broken right now and everything else is going to be awesome. It is looking at the things that are going to come up, that are going to need maintenance, that are going to need to be addressed, and making sure that you have plotted out a way to get those things done in a timely manner. And that's really where we're going to get into the habit and the challenge. It's sort of, for lack of a better term, it goes to, some of the longer term scheduling stuff that we've talked about. We've talked about some habits related to daily scheduling, but within that, I think we also need to look at some of the longer term things, because yes, we don't want to spend all day, we don't want to spend all day every day thinking about what we're going to do 6 months from now or a year from now or 2 years from now. But what we do want to do when we're building our list for today is our prioritization should have as part of it the idea of what are the things that I need to get done because I need to be making progress on this, versus the things that's like, I really could, like, if I don't do this today, it's not going to matter. And it does get into the idea of the thing that if I don't do it today, it's not going to matter that much. So I'm going to push it tomorrow. At some point, it raises in priority that's like, I need to get that done. It's the idea of building habits. A lot of times I've heard that you can miss a day if you're doing a daily habit, but don't miss 2 days in a row. And that's sort of where we want to get with this. And it's the idea of taking something big and then looking at it and breaking it down to how do I get that thing complete? Instead of looking at it as a whole, instead it's like, how do I break this down? And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about as well. So it's how do I go from this huge honking elephant of a project to breaking it down and realizing that, okay, it's got legs, it's got a trunk, it's got ears, it's got a tail, it's got, a midsection, and then looking at those sections and saying, okay, well, how do I tackle the foot? Well, within the foot, maybe there's like a knee and there's a foot and there's toes and legs and stuff. Okay, well, then how do I break that down? That's the kind of stuff we want to do. Is we want to take, in order to do this, we have to be able to look at the big problem, which may be like in a agile sense, like an epic or something like that. It's like, how do I, for example, how do I build, let's say, billing functionality for my customer, for their app? They've got this huge application, and now I'm assigned as a developer billing. Well, and it's like, let's look at what are the pieces, what are included in billing. Now, maybe you got something put together where you've got user stories and you've got very specific requirements or families of requirements. So you can now break that down. So for example, billing may be like sending it out, like invoicing, but then it's also receiving payments, and then it's applying payments, and then it's reconciling those. So maybe those are like 4 areas right there. So now you've already broken that down a little bit. So if you have to get this billing thing done in 6 months, well, okay, I've got these 4 areas. Well, let's look a little bit deeper into those so we can figure out, are they equally the same amount of work? So I need to get like about a month and a half to get to each of them. Or is there one that's going to take half the time and the others can get done very quickly? And so I basically just rinse and repeat. So I go into, like, say, for example, the invoicing piece. So now I've gone into that. And I'm like, all right, I need to be able to send invoices out. Well, that's like, okay, well, what do I need to do to be able to send invoices? Well, I need to be able to attach all of the bills or charges that are for that customer for that invoice period. So I need to be able to have some way to enter an invoice period and then have it go, either have a list of customers or just grab all customers. Then for a customer, I need to be able to get all of the charges that are related to them during a time frame. And then I need to have, maybe there's some calculations. So I've got to take all of that, and maybe now I've got to add in maybe some interest charges, or maybe I need to figure out, is there a past due? And what does an invoice look like? What am I actually telling them that adds up to, this is what you owe, and this is what I need you to pay me by whatever the due date is. So now you've broken that into these smaller pieces, and you can estimate what it's going to take to each of those. And then now, once you've done that, you can sort of roll that back up, and you now have a rough idea. It's going to take X amount of time to do the billing, or to do the invoice part of the billing. Okay, now I can move on to, for example, receiving payments. Well, what's involved with that? Do I need to set up an integration with the system because now I'm going to be taking, credit card payments? Do I need to have some sort of a system that allows for taking cash in, like some sort of POS or something, like point of sale system or something along those lines? Do I need to, can I take partial payments? Do I need to be able to support payments like from checks? And then if they're checks, do I need to have some way to make sure that those checks have actually been deposited to the bank? Now I've built these pieces out and I can estimate all those and I can roll that up. And that is the receiving payment side. And we keep doing that. And so what we'll do is we'll break it down to certain, a few pieces. And ideally, every time you break it down, it's, I don't know, three, five, maybe a half dozen pieces. And then you break that in and break that down and break that down. And eventually you may have to go several layers deep and have hundreds or maybe thousands, heaven forbid, of pieces. But then those are all bite-sized chunks that you can figure out what is it going to take to do that. You can roll that stuff back up. And now for example, this is project planning 101. It's going to take me 6 months of work to do this. And lo and behold, I have a 6 month deadline. Okay, I need to make sure what work am I getting done each month, each week, each day to keep on my track to keep that thing going to hit that 6 month goal. So that's part of what we're talking about is like, how do we do that? And this is where we're going to get into the challenge. But first, I'm going to let Michael give his 2 cents and then some worth on how we do this.
Thanks, Rob. So you laid out at a very good high level from like a project manager, a high level view of breaking the problem down. I want to kind of flip it a little bit and take it more from the developer's perspective as we start taking those pieces and looking at them even further before we actually start working on them. So as developers, we essentially take these tickets or take these tasks like Rob broke down. And once you have them at the small pieces, it's time to start working on them. So we create the tickets, we do the sprints, and we lay these out. But as developers, a lot of times we get into the habit of, okay, we have a ticket, we jump in, and we just start working the problem. The problem may be in the fact that the problem itself isn't broken down enough. The problem hasn't been simplified. So what you might be doing is you might be working on a feature and blowing it out beyond what it needs to be. So what you really need to do, and how I want to tackle this, is as a developer, as you start to do your work, look at the task you have been given and read through it again. Now, you may have gone through the ceremonies of the high level pointing and all that, but still, typically we are busy. Typically, those meetings go quickly and you got to go through very fast and everyone just asks the questions as they can. But sometimes you don't get to that work right away. Sometimes that work doesn't get reviewed or doesn't get started for weeks. And while it was in your mindset at the time you did the pointing, things may have changed by the time you get to that ticket. Things in the system may be different. So it's always a good idea when you sit down to start a problem or a task, read through the whole process again, read through your ticket, and make sure that you are tackling one problem, that your focus is on one feature, and that feature or the piece that you're trying to work on isn't really multiple pieces, doesn't need to be broken down further. Because if you get into it and you find out, oh, this needs this needs this needs this, your task that may have been agreed to that, hey, this is going to take a couple of days to do, may now mean it's going to take a couple of weeks. Now, if you don't do this, if you don't take the time to read through this now, you could be at the end of your sprint and be like, oh, why is this 1-2 day task taking me 2 weeks? If you had taken the time day one to reread your ticket, take 15 minutes, hey, even take a half an hour if it's a very complex ticket, read through it again, and then kind of visualize what it is that you're building. If you get to the point where this task, as you're reading through it, it's like, wait, this doesn't make sense anymore because we made this change, but the ticket says it wants this, well, that you have a conflict. You need to raise that now before you start the work, because you could be removing, or that requirement might have changed. So while it is always in our mind that we have to get stuff done, we have to get work done, we have to show that we're productive, make sure that the work you're doing is the right work. Even though it's in a ticket, it doesn't necessarily mean it is the right thing to do. Always review your work before you start your work. It's kind of going to be my mantra on this one. You want to simplify the problem, but you also want to make sure that you are getting the problem done right, that you are solving the problem in the right way. So again, to break it down further, make sure that when you take your task, read through the task, make sure that it fits within the big picture. Also, make sure that it is one concise piece of that feature and not multiple pieces. Because if it's multiple pieces, you might need to break it down further and it might need to require more tickets or more features that need to be fleshed out. So, before you work, read through your requirements, read through your tickets, make sure you understand the problem, make sure that the ticket addresses that problem, and make sure that the problem that is being addressed is still relevant to the big picture. So what are your thoughts on that, Rob?
First, I have to unmute myself. See, it's like making sure you put your task. As you're thinking through that, I think this goes back to something that we have talked about before from a coding and documentation point of view, is the idea of instead of just writing code, is start out with like essentially pseudocode, is use some comments that say, I'm solving this problem. And this actually is very near and dear to my heart because I'm spending a lot of time essentially doing some code reviews and refactoring and things like that, where there are these very complex functions and methods and figure out, is there a better way to do this that is more readable, that breaks this down so it's smaller chunks of work and thus probably easier to reuse those chunks of work. And I think that's the way to do it, is we can take a problem and have a main or a primary application, whatever it is we want to think about, that we start out where it's just all it is a bunch of comments of, in order to solve this problem, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. And so that may not be the be all and end all, but this is where it goes to what Michael's talking about, is now you've thought through it a little. You're spending some time, dare I say, designing your solution a little bit and saying, this is the approach I'm going to take. And then as you get into each of those steps, you may find some additional things. You're like, oh, shoot, I need to break this into 2 steps. Or I forgot that because I have this, that means there's this other step I'm going to have to do. There's things like that. But what it is doing is it's giving us our sort of like our outline of what it really is. I guess it comes out, it's an outline of what is it going to take to get this thing solved. Now we've broken it into smaller steps. And even with each of those, as we're thinking about them, that may help us break it into other steps. Or the reason we try to want to do this sooner rather than later is it may bring up questions, because we'll say, wait a minute, I don't have all the information I need to complete this step. Because now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure what that's going to be. So I'm going to have to go, reach back out to a customer or my manager, or I'm going to have to go back and spend some time thinking about this design or whatever it is to be able to actually figure out what needs to be done to complete that task. And in doing so, I think you're going to write smaller, easier to understand, easier to maintain code. It goes to like, there's all kinds of linters and stuff out there that'll tell you that, there's like these code complexity scores and all this kind of stuff that are, in a general sense, they're just trying to simplify stuff. And sometimes it's too much, it's too granular, but sometimes it's not. So it is very much a good rule of thumb to say, okay, I shouldn't have, thousands of line of code in a function. I should be breaking that thing down where possible. And so it really shouldn't be that much. It should be, there's maybe a series of steps. And if that has too many steps, then maybe I can group some of those steps so that it is readable, that it's understandable, it's easier to maintain, it's easier to document, it's easier for somebody else to come behind you and say, oh, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm doing it. Before I give the challenge, I want to throw that back to you, Michael, and see if there's anything that popped up in your head, anything else to discuss.
Yeah, so the other thing, because of how you laid it out, I like that. Which goes back to my test-driven development model, is when you sit down with a ticket, the best way to this works great for test-driven development is start the ticket, essentially write out the steps on how you would how you would essentially test this ticket from the end user. And as you walk through, you start finding out, okay, I get to this step here, I get to this step here. Oh, wait, I now have multiple choices on this step. Well, if you are writing a feature, you should not have multiple choices unless that's defined in the ticket. If you get to a step and it's like, oh, well, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here, you need to stop and go ask for direction because you should have a straight path from the user's expectation to the solution. You should not have multiple paths to get there unless it is an if then scenario. And that if then should be laid out within the ticket. So if you, again, write it out or kind of do it as a test driven approach first, you're going to catch a lot of this, a lot of these, I guess, open ended questions that are in tickets where they're not flushed out, they're not well defined. Or if the feature has changed, as you're going through this process, you'll get to a step and say, wait, the system doesn't do this anymore. So why am I being asked to do this in this ticket?
I think that combination of the why, the thinking through it and the why is really going to solve a lot of your problems. It's amazing how those are very simple steps. They are a little bit hard to build the habits to get there, but once you do, they will make a big difference. They will help you stay focused and help you really comes back down to like leveling out stuff. So you're not going to be surprised as much. You're going to be able to estimate better. You're going to be able to plan better. And the bumps and bruises that generally come with software development will be smaller and very manageable. So from a habit point of view, this is one of those very similar to a couple of our sort of a theme we have as we're starting this year, it feels like, with a couple of these episodes and building better habits. Is it with each item that you're doing on a daily basis? This is your challenge for the next week. When you start a task, the first thing you do is actually start the task. Is it's like, look at your to-do list and say, I'm going to focus on this task. So this is what I'm going to do right now. And first thing you do with that is what, we've talked about and probably like, what does it mean to complete it? Okay. Now I know what it means to complete it. So I know what I need to get there. So walk through, what am I going to do to get that done? Now it could be as simple as like, for example, I want to get my laundry done. Okay. How do I get that done? Well, I need to go to my laundry hamper. But maybe first I have to pick up all my dirty clothes and put it into the hamper. Then I have to take the hamper to the washing place, wherever that happens to be. And then I have to do some number of loads of wash and some number of loads of drying. And then when I'm done, I need to gather all that crap up and I need to fold it, iron it, put it away, whatever it is, depending on what your tasks, how you want to define that. But now what I've done is said, okay, in order to be done with doing my laundry, these are the steps I need to do. And of course, in doing so, you're going to do exactly what I just did. Is you're going to say, well, first I just have to get my clothes to the washing place. But as I said, it's like, oh wait, maybe first I need to gather my clothes into some place so I can then take them somewhere. So for example, if I'm going to, do a garbage run, first I need to, what are all the garbage cans I need to empty into wherever I'm, the device, the transportation thing that is going to do the garbage run. And then I need to dump it all out and come home. Those kinds of things. When you start laying out those steps, I think you'll be amazed at how often you're like, oh yeah, there's another step I need to think about that may have been a pain in the butt had you gotten into doing the process and then had to adjust and add that step versus you thinking about that step from the start. In particular things where it's like, maybe it's like making dinner. Well, if I'm going to slow cook dinner, first I need to prep it and get the slow cooker going, because if I wait until 5 minutes before I'm going to eat dinner, that slow cooker, hence the name slow cooker, is not going to have my food ready for me. So there's things like that I need to do to plan out my day. And if I think about those steps, it's going to help me. So the advanced thing would be to look at all the steps you need to do to get the things that you have to get done. Let's organize those. But we're going to start simple with your habit. I just want to do a habit of attacking a task. And that the first thing I do is I write down, how am I going to get to that task? What am I going to do? What are the steps to complete that task? As I'm thinking about this, I think this is going to be really fun for me to do because I don't do it this way, but I'm going to be very anal retentive about it and try to do it in the next week. And let's see what this works out for me as far as habits go. So first step for you, send us an email at info@developreneur.com and let us know how you're doing. How do you think about these habit building things are working for you? Is this a great use of, is this getting you towards being a better developer? Are we building a better developer by building better habits? And if not, I'm more than happy to hear from you what would be a better way. If it's just a matter of like, tell Rob to shut up and Michael needs to do everything, cool, because my schedule just got a lot easier. So, but don't do that just to make my schedule easier. But whatever it is, we have topics coming up. We have new seasons. We are not even close to done. Maybe you're like, oh, sadly so. But no, we're going to be around for a while. We have a lot of things that we can cover. And so we want to hear from you. What is the best thing? What is the best use of your time? What are the best topics for us to cover? Whether they're timely, whether they're more career, span of your career kinds of things, whether it's just how to tie your shoes. I don't know what it may be, but it's the things that you come bring to us and say, this is what I don't think you're giving us enough of. And I'd like to hear more of it, because that's what we want to do. We want to give you as much that you want as we possibly can. And if not, we'll fake it, because hey, we got skills. That being said, there's so many ways you can contact us. I'm not even going to waste your time. You can listen to the next episode, or you can go to the one before us. Go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus material.
So it's interesting you threw out the slow cooker at the end, because one of the best ways to think about simplifying the problem or breaking it down is cooking. If the task you're essentially, even as developers, we need to think of our tasks as a recipe. The ticket needs to identify what the problem is, what it is that we're going to cook. We need to have the end product, what it is that we're trying to deliver. And then we need to hopefully have the steps broken down as to what we need to solve the problem. If we don't have what we need to solve the problem, then we can't write really useful code. We can write code, but it may not solve the problem. So we need to make sure that not only do we have what it is that we're trying to do and the end product, but as developers, when we look at our tickets, we need to make sure that we have the steps. We have what we need to solve this problem. If the steps basically could lead to multiple solutions, then we have not refined or defined the problem or the solution in a clear enough way for you to get from A to B.
I'm trying to think of a good, it comes down to, as I've thought about, as I sort of like out of the blue came up with this habit challenge. I'm really liking this idea of even like the simplest things I'm doing, because I do have some of these tasks that are like the 15-minute tasks kind of thing. But even within those, and probably even more so with those, is to spend a minute basically saying, okay, how am I going to get this done? So that when I get to the task, it's just like bam, 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 knock those things out. Very much like a Pomodoro kind of thing, is taking that, and which has been effective to me, is that I have often taken a smallish kind of task, a 20 to 30 minute kind of task, and made that one of my Pomodoros for the day, saying, I'm going to just like go heads down, get this done. And usually I do start it with, what am I going to get done in this next little bit? Because I don't want to be in the middle of a Pomodoro and then be sitting there thinking, okay, what is my next step? I want to be able to get in and just like crank through it. So I front load that. And I think that's maybe a really good combo to help you guys get started with this, is if you think of these in like Pomodoros or mini sprints within the days, is what needs to be done with that. And maybe you do start each one as just like in a Pomodoro, maybe you add something, say in the first 2 minutes, I am going to plan out what am I doing in the next 23 minutes of my Pomodoro or something like that. I mean, this may be some sort of modified thing that we'll call it a Develperado or something like that. We'll figure something out that'll be some little branded name, but it's like maybe we can tweak that and find a way to make that more effective to us. So think about that as you're going into it. Is like, where can I spend just a little bit of time thinking through this, and particularly complex tasks, but even honestly, some of the things that are rote, like dishes or laundry or groceries or cooking or some of those kinds of things. Like, where can I maybe spend a little time with that and maybe performance tune that a little bit, do it a little bit better. That being said, we will wrap this one up and let you get to your day, because we got crap to do too. So go out there and have yourself a great one. We are still chugging along. We are getting towards the end, probably another month-ish or so of habits, and then we'll get into the next season, which we still haven't figured that one out. So we need better habits of maybe how to figure out where we're going to get to with our upcoming seasons and what our topics are going to be. Feedback is always welcome. Developreneur.com, Facebook site, X, email, smoke signals, you name it, we're good for it. Telepathy, whatever it is, you figure it out. we'll find a way to receive it, and we want to take that feedback and do something with it. Go out there and have yourself a great one, and we will talk to you next time.